Hello and welcome back to the channel. Here we are again, reviewing another one of the Forge World models from the Necron faction. This time we're going to be doing the Canoptek Tomb Sentinel, which you'll find in the Imperial Armor Compendium book, if you weren't aware of that. So going on to our shout out of the day, it's going to Heedy1 for their comment relating to the Necron Lord, and he'd rather use the Triarch Stalker, which is a really good shout to get the rerolls of ones to hit. Also guys, we've tried this out in our Space Marine video recently. We're just going to trim back some of the screens that we normally produce in the videos. Give me some feedback below whether you prefer this or not, and if you've got no opinion whatsoever, you don't care, also let me know. So let's get on with the review for the Canoptek Tomb Sentinel. It's coming in at 6 power level or 125 points. It's coming within the fast attack slots of your detachments. It's going to have a movement characteristic of a 10 inch, it's got a weapon skill 4+, ballistic skill 4+, strength 6, toughness 7, wounds 9, attacks 4, leadership 10 and a 3+ save. So it has the feel of a giant Canoptek Wraith, only getting one model for the unit, but it's going to have 9 wounds. As for the actual keywords for the model, it's got the monster keyword as well as being Canoptek. So it's going to have some sort of synergies which we'll go over later in the video. As for the actual abilities itself, it's got living metal to regain a lost wound at the start of the turn. It's got command protocols to be potentially used in one of the directives for the command protocols if they're within 6 inches of a character and you've got a noble on the tabletop. And it's also got dimensional translocation, so it can effectively deep strike in turn 2 onwards more than 9 inches away from enemy models. As for the actual war gear, it's equipped with an Exile Cannon, Tomb Sentinel Claws and a Gloom Prism. So let's go through all 3 of those. Starting with the Exile Cannon, it's got an 18 inch range, heavy D6, strength 10, -4 AP and the damage is 3. It does have the blast ability, which I personally don't like the blast ability at this moment in time. When a unit gets tagged in combat with the blast ability, it simply can't fire, it makes its weapon redundant. But it is a strength 10 weapon after all, heavy D6, so it is very comparable to a Canoptek Doomstalker, except it's only 18 inch range. It's then got the Tomb Sentinel Claws, which is its melee weapon. It's strength +1, making it a strength 7, -2 AP, and the damage is 2. So a decent melee weapon in general. It's not as good as the Canoptek Spider's melee weapon with those strength 8 claws that they have, but it's still pretty good overall. Then the last bit of war gear is the Gloom Prism. So in your opponent's psychic phase, the bearer can attempt to deny 1 psychic power as if it was a psyker. So we don't have much anti-psychery in our army, so it's pretty good that we've got that sort of option. We've got a few other options in the codex, such as the Silent King for example, as well as the Canoptek Spider. As for some stratagems that you could use with this model, there's only one, which is Enslaved Protectors, 1 command point. Due to the fact that it's got the Canoptek keyword, in the opponent's charge phase it can heroically intervene as if it was a character. Now the fact that this thing's got a massive base will make it a lot easier to actually pull this one off, and with its strength 7 weapon it could be quite a danger to your opponent. As for some synergy, when you're talking about Canoptek units, you've always got to consider the Technomancer, either the Canoptek Cloak to give it a 10 inch movement to keep up with the Tomb Sentinel, and it's got the fly ability, although the Tomb Sentinel doesn't actually fly, but then it'll be repairing that Dynasty model within 3 inches up to D3 lost wounds per turn. Or if you prefer to take the Canoptek Control Node, not going to be as quick, it's going to stick to his standard movement, but models within 6 inches will +1 to the attacker's hit roll, so effectively it'll be weapon skill, ballistic skill value of a 3+. You can also take the fail-safe Overcharger Arcana with the Technomancer. Done in the command phase, you select a Canoptek unit within 9 inches of the bearer, and then until the start of the next command phase you can add 1 to the attacks characteristics of the model. Unless it's a monster or a vehicle, then you'll be adding D3. So the Tomb Sentinel is actually a monster, so it'll be D3 additional attacks, so a potential of 7 attacks there. If you wanted to take a Chronomancer, you can also do that with the Chronometron ability, granting a Dynasty unit within 9 inches, the reroll to their charge rolls, as well as a 5+ invulnerable save. Now this thing doesn't have an invuln save, something it lacks when you're comparing it to the Canoptek Wraiths in particular. No invuln saves there. I always like to throw in the Triarch Stalker at the moment because of the targeting relay and the fact that it's got a ranged weapon. So once a Triarch Stalker has made a hit with its own range attacks, then army wide you're going to get to reroll 1s when targeting that enemy unit. So with that Exile Cannon in particular, strength 10, rerolling the 1s could be pretty good. Then as we already mentioned earlier when we mentioned the Gloom Prism, if you wanted to go with the really anti-psyker list, you can take a Silent King because he can attempt to deny one of the psychic powers, and also a Canoptek Spider can do the same thing for 5 points with a Gloom Prism. Then furthermore, if you're taking the Zaoken Dynasty, you can also do that with the Stratagem, Empiric Damping. Speaking of dynasties, if you go in the Methric code, adding 3 inches to the range, giving it a 21 inch range, it could hinder the unit, but it could also save the unit in some sense, because you don't want this unit getting charged if you want to be using its blast weapon. So keeping it a little bit further back could be the better way to go. And of course, if you're at half range, you're going to get an additional AP with that. With the Nihilak code, he's going to get objective secured. So with 9 wounds and toughness 7, that's going to be a real difficult tank to shift. If you did want to stick with the melee side of the unit, then you're going to go with the Novak code to +1 to the charge rolls, as well as in the first round of combat there'll be an extra AP there as well. Then finally, as we already mentioned, the Zarakan Dynasty, getting to ignore mortal wounds on a 5+ and re-rolling a single wound roll, especially when you've got strength 10, that can be really handy. And we already mentioned the Empiric Dampen Stratagem. Now there's plenty of Ancient Dynasty, Custom Dynasty options if you wanted to go with those. I'm just going to quickly skim over the options that I'd maybe take. So from the first list, you've got Eternal Conquerors for objectives secured, Contemptuous to the codes. So if you've gone against a character unit, you can add one to the attacker's hit rolls. Now especially because you've got the Deep Strike ability, you could actually come in from Deep Strike, target a character, shoot him, get into combat with him, and then be hitting on 3s as well. Unyielding if you want a 6+ invulnerable save, Superior Artisans to re-roll a single wound roll, Butchers for the +1 to the charge. Rad Reaved I think is quite decent, but probably better served on some Scarabs or something like that, but overall it's not a bad option to get a -1 to enemy toughnesses if you're within engagement range. And then finally Masters of the Martial, just to re-roll a single hit roll. Again with that strength 10 weapon in particular, you don't want to be missing that. Then from the second list you've got the Ancient Stir, because it's got the Canoptek keyword, so +1 to the movement characteristics, as well as the piling and consolidation moves. You've got to rise against the Interlopers. If you're attacking an infantry or biker unit, then any unmodified hit rolls of a 6 will auto wound. So you would hope for some 6s throughout the battle. Relentlessly Expansionist to get that pre-game movement of 6 inches. And then finally Healthy Paranoia to add 3 inches to the range characteristics. Quite like the metric code there. So as for the summary for this unit today, starting with the good, we've got the quick movement of 12 inches. It's got 9 wounds with toughness 7, so it's a very tanky model, very quick and tanky. You don't usually get both at the same time in the Necron army. It's got the strength 10 range attack, which is really good. Wounding toughness 5 or less on 2s, or most vehicles you're going to be wounding them on 3s. And it's also good in both melee and at short range. So it does have the feel of like a Dreadnought for example, because they're both good in melee and at range. And add that Gloom Prism as well for the anti-psyker abilities as well. Especially lately when you've got the Thousand Suns and the Grey Knights Codex coming out, could be something of use there. Especially when you're combining that with the Canoptek Spider or a Silent King for example. Then finally the Deep Strike Dimensional Translocation ability I think is huge for an Alpha Strike. You can literally Deep Strike in, turn 2 onwards, use your strength 10 weapon, then go for the charge on a unit that's going to be worth more than 125 points, so you should be getting your points back, and then they've still got to deal with your Tomb Sentinel. That's going to be in their back lines or somewhere in a dangerous position of the battle. So yeah, I think the Deep Strike ability is pretty huge on this. As for the bad, there's no fly ability or no Wraith form ability like a Canoptek Wraith. It's got no invuln save like a Canoptek Wraith either. The range attack is unreliable with D6 attacks, and it's got the blast ability, and it's at short range as well. So all those things don't really go together that well if I'm honest. Blast and that short range means you're going to get tagged in combat, which therefore means you cannot be shooting your ranged weapon, even into combat. I know you're a monster and you can normally fire into combat, but with the blast ability you can't do that. Then the last bullet point here, I've put that it needs a Cryptek to be useful. You've either got to take a Technomancer or a Chronomancer to buff this thing up, otherwise it's going solo. Yes, it can still do its thing, deep striking in, but I think if it's hitting on 4s for example, it's not going to be as reliable. That's with the Technomancer. If you wanted the invuln save with the Chronomancer, you've obviously got to pay that tax as well. So you're therefore looking at about 200 points approximately just to do that. But overall I actually do quite like the unit, especially for that Deep Strike ability. So let's get on with the rating today. So I'm going to be giving the Canoptek Tomb Sentinel a generous Planet 40k rating of 4 stars. Now you might think this is actually over generous. This is compared to other units within the Necron army, and there's not much really to compete with. I know it's not a heavy support, but it kind of competes with those heavy support options, the Doomsday Ark, the Canoptek Doomstalker, those kind of strength 10 weapons. It's competing with them. It doesn't have to stay stationary to do so. It can move, it can deep strike, and still fire strength 10 as well as fight as well. So I do give it that extra star there, which puts it up to a 4 star for me. Let me know what you guys think below. Do you agree with this rating? Do you field this unit? How do you field this unit? What dynasty do you use? Let's get some dialogue in the comments section. And remember, the best comment will be shouted out in the next Necron video. Also guys, if you are new, remember to sub below. We're still trying to get to 4,000 subscribers. We may be very close to that by the time this video comes out. And drop a like on your exits. And thank you all for watching. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.